Go.
Welcome to the Climate Reality Project presentation. My name is Gary Leabman. I am your leader tonight. I was trained in Mexico City in 2017 by two Nobel Prize winners in a room with 1,000 people learning to be leaders like I am. And there's now almost 40,000 of us. And we're trying to get the message out about how serious the situation is. And the words climate crisis that the media is now starting to use, it's really correct. So I'm going to jump right into the presentation. The first part can be disturbing, but I have solutions that we'll cover at the end. It's a beautiful Earth, beautiful. It's the only one like it in the solar system as far as we can tell. And we've done a wonderful job building a modern civilization using fossil fuels, starting with coal in the 1850s. But look at how the millions of metric tons of carbon have increased in our atmosphere through 2009, and I can tell you it's still growing through 2020. And looking towards the middle of the chart there, the number 360 is there. Well, 350 parts per million of CO2 was considered to be a threshold we didn't want to cross, but it has been crossed, and we're now up in the 420 range. And the goal of the Climate Paris Accord was to get down to 350. It's a huge amount of energy every day going up into our atmosphere. And the atmosphere is just a thin shell that's protecting the Earth from solar radiation, incoming objects. It's been very great, wonderful for billions of years, but in just a few hundred years, we've changed the dynamic. And this conversation today is called Climate Change in Your Health. So you'll see the focus on health, and you will see me beating up on coal, much deservedly. So the ozone has been impacted. There's been a hole in the ozone that could heal by 2030 if we start taking action now. It is slightly closing, but we also have all this particulate matter going in the air. And the greenhouse gases, they are the cause. CO2 is the big one. Methane is the threat, the bigger threat, because it's 80 times more threatening than CO2, which is carbon dioxide. So air pollution. Now, this is a big chart, and there's a lot there. I'm not going to expect you to read all of it or look at it now. We're going to cover these things through the presentation, which will take about 45 more minutes. Air pollution and allergies we're going to cover first. So it's deadly. This air pollution is very deadly around the world, and a lot of it has to do with this particulate matter. And look at the two smallest ones, which now were way smaller than a hair on your head, which is 10 parts per million and 2.5 parts per million. And look at the next slide. The two there, the 2.5 can cause skin and eye disease, and the 10 decreased lung function. And that's what is happening in many parts of the world, especially where there's the burning of coal. And it has long-term effects, and anyone with lung function issues is more likely to get COVID and die from COVID. And secondhand smoke, we've all heard about. No mother would do that to her child, I hope, and yet we do it to ourselves and our children when we get on highways and we're breathing this output from burning fossil fuels, in this case, gasoline and diesel. So there was this plan that the eastern states had proposed where they could save 1,000 premature deaths and 1,300 fewer cases of asthma. And that's just in New England. Now, it's going to take higher taxes maybe to pay for that, but I'll tell you from what I understand, and I hope you understand from looking at this video, it's going to be worth it. And a lot of that will come in savings because your utility bills will go down when we quit burning coal or using nuclear, which are the two most expensive forms of electricity generation. So again, we're talking health, and it's health of children and adults. And children, we do know that there can be developmental harm by ozone and particulate pollution. And adults can have reproductive harm. And then there's what we hear about every day: asthma, lung cancer, wheezing, coughing, shortness of breath. COPD is a good example that nurses have told me is increasing rapidly. And these are the things that weaken a person's immune system and opens up to COVID. So we've had an increase in pollen and in allergies. An allergist I know who is ready to retire said he's never seen allergists so busy across the whole industry. Asthma. This is more and more serious, especially among children, and can lead to 4,000 deaths in this country a year. 1 out of 12 people has asthma. Now, this is a chart that you could find anywhere you live. And this one is a power plant in Leabman, Missouri that burns coal. And if you look towards the second part about health impacts, you'll see that 153 deaths per year in this zone, which is only 12 miles. So as you look down, there's asthma, heart attacks, bronchitis, work days lost. That's really important to our economy focus. And Ameren, which owns the plant we just looked at and also owns these. So when I present in the St. Louis area, I show this slide, which, you know, there's 4 coal plants that are leading to 289 premature deaths, the heart attacks, the asthma attacks. And these are the things that won't happen because coal is going out. It's not just because we know this information, which I'm sharing with you. It's because it's too expensive compared to solar and wind and other renewables. So the cost of cleaner energy, it's about $30 a ton. And coal right now costs $80 a ton. Benefit of cleaner energy, it could save in hospital bills, not to mention your health and inconveniences, up to 200 per ton of CO2. And notice in Asia, it's way, way greater, but they are trying to get away and doing a good job of getting away from fossil fuels. So it's a big number. It's hard to get your head around. 9 million people being killed every year, and we have the solutions at hand, and we're not acting on them fast enough. Now, the Paris Accord said, we're going to act on this. This is serious. And most countries in the world still comply or try to comply. Some aren't even trying. Now, African Americans, 3 times more likely to die from this air pollution. One of the reasons is these plants, these coal burning plants, tend to be located when they're in urban areas in the poorest parts of town. This is a shocking statistic, but COVID deaths for Black Americans in middle age, 35 to 40, 10 times higher than for white Americans of the same age. And deaths by race, notice African Americans, twice that of whites, Asians. So we'll move on here. What extreme heat does, and that is devastating. It's the biggest killer of them all. And here we have a slide showing years where the record global temperatures were. And notice 18, 17, 15, and 16 are all right there on the top. And I can tell you that 19 was greater than all of these except 16. And 20 is on track. 2020 is on track to be right up there with 2016, the hottest year ever. St. Louis, it's just, what a chart. I mean, we just see the stair-step growth as we were seeing the stair-step growth of the use of fossil fuels. And we've changed the temperature from an average of 55 degrees to an average of 58.75. Now that may seem, well, you know, that's only 3 degrees, but the extremes are much greater, especially on the hot side. Water quality. Well, we're getting some really extreme rain. So this chart starts in 1895 when records were first being kept. You notice 1993 is the biggest, but it was sort of an anomaly year. But now look what's happened in the last 5 years. 2015, 17, 19, 18 were all big rain event years. And it's happening again in 2020. Now, if you're living in a part of the world where you don't have running water, or you don't have running water because a hurricane is hitting your community in the United States right now, or because forest fires have forced you into an area where there's no power, where there's no running water, all these things can increase the risk of contracting COVID. Now, this is my hometown, Hermann, Missouri. This picture is from May 2nd, 2017. Same thing happened in 2015. Same thing happened twice in 2019. And it's happened again in 2020. This is not a good way to have transportation moving from I-70 to I-44 on the major link, which is Highway 19, and this brief part of it which shares with Highway 100. The bridge in the middle of the picture, we've been asking in our town for a new bridge for more than a decade. Now, by the decade, I like to look at this slide and look back to when I was 21 years old. The average rainfall at the end of the decade of the 60s was 39 inches. Today, and including up to 2020, it's closer to 43 inches. So that's a 10% growth in precipitation. Wonderful for gardeners like me, wonderful for farmers, but not good if you live in the floodplain. And it's not just in the United States. Around the world, there is more disaster events and more frequent. And this child lives in one of those islands that are going underwater, and they're already making plans to move. Now back to Missouri, we've got these bigger rain events, and they're happening more often. Sorry, the numbers broke up at 1993, 2008. These years, the last 23 years here, there have been a lot more of these higher number of daily rainfall events. In August of this year, my town, Hermann, Missouri, had 7 inches of rain on August 1st and another 5 inches of rain on August 8th. Now, that's a lot of inches. That's more than the average rainfall in the whole summer usually. And we got it in 2 different days, a week apart. So this is what causes flash floods. Now, you might be asking, why is this happening worldwide? And I have the answer here. I'll describe it briefly. As the earth is heated up, the largest part of that earth is ocean, and there's more evaporation off the ocean. That puts more moisture in the air. As the earth heats up, there's also more drying of the soil, especially when more soil is exposed because we've been cutting down trees at a horrific rate. So you have 2 areas, the landmass and the ocean, putting more moisture in the air. That air has moisture that goes somewhere. And it's coming in Missouri in these larger rainfalls. It's coming to Florida as we speak with another hurricane. While the West is an example of the dryness that is causing the fires. Climate migrants. It's already begun, including in the United States and Louisiana. Flash flooding. It's happened in my town. Luckily, we were able to get people out of the low water, the low area of the park where we have an RV park. And these downpours are increasing exposure to disease. So looking at the second one down on the right, sewage overflow from treatment plants and municipal lines that can actually back up in people's homes. So in St. Louis, the Metropolitan Sewer District is on a $2 billion program to remove and replace and actually augment what's happening underground and has for over a century. There are these big tunnels that have a wall in the middle of them, and sewage is supposed to go down one side and stormwater down another. Well, the wall doesn't go all the way to the top. And when there's too much floodwater, stormwater, it overflows into the sewage water, which then goes into the Merrimack or the Mississippi River, and it's causing these high bacteria counts that then a lot of towns are taking their drinking water from. So $2 billion to stop and change that program. Vector ecology. So now we're going to talk about the spread of disease. Mosquitoes and ticks are my nemesis. They both love me. And I have had Lyme disease last year in the summer. Thankfully, a mild case, but I had the bullet rash, the bullseye rash. And I got a tick bite the year before that, for some reason, it had the hallmarks of Lyme disease, but I'm sorry, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, but I didn't have a severe case there either. That's what my leg looked like last summer, briefly. I went to the doctor immediately, and there are some antibiotics that can treat you and keep it minor or make it all go away. So each degree centigrade of warming, which is equivalent of 1.8 Fahrenheit, leads to a lower yield. Farmers in my area have talked about, they know when it's over 85 degrees, the corn isn't going to be producing. And you get a string of greater than 85 degree days, and it results in less production. And that's true of wheat and rice and soy. And this is what most humans get calories from, especially in Asia. And then there's disease that is more likely to come when you got higher temperatures and droughts. And it causes more food in our diets to have this nitrate, which you'll see listed on a lot of food products, and it interferes with the blood's ability to carry oxygen. Again, we have more people with lung issues. So food insecurity, it's something, thankfully, the United States doesn't deal with on a regular basis. The pandemic may affect that. But here's an example of what the world has been doing in terms of food production over a long period of time. North America, we are lucky to live here with our Canadian neighbors, and we have this surplus of wheat and corn, enough that we can help ship to all those countries, starting with Eastern Europe, Central America, Western Europe, and they're not producing enough food to feed their people. And the world has almost 8 billion people now, which is not sustainable if North, South America, and Australia can't produce their crops. By the way, Australia is in, excuse me, year 6 of a drought. But good news, there is more organic agriculture happening, and hopefully this tenfold increase from 1999 will increase more and more. Environmental degradation takes many, many forms. Here's an example in Louisiana. Highest death rates are in the areas where there's the most of these petroleum plants. Port Arthur, Texas, floods regularly, flooded again in 2019, and chemical releases. Our current administration has allowed for a lighter lessening of the rules, so there can be bleeding at the wellheads and more oil on the ground. So we see, and I want to point out that big hurricane is Hurricane Sandy in 2012, flooded parts of New York City, including the World Trade Center monument. Upper right, notice that kind of looks like a tornado, but it's not. It's called a rain bomb, and these are happening more frequently. Fires down below happening right now. And then this clear cutting, it's an example of what's happening more and more in parts of the world, especially the Amazon, so they can grow crops, have cattle, palm oil. All these things are devastating to the forest mass, which takes in oxygen and releases, I said that backwards, takes in carbon dioxide and releases oxygen. So burning coal in India is a large coal burning for electricity. So notice those kids had masks on in 2016. This is not pandemic related. And there's actually right now in Los Angeles, they're wearing masks for COVID, but also the air in major cities in LA, San Francisco, Sacramento have a air quality looking something like this. 8% higher death rates where there's this fine particle air pollution, whereas wood and coal are a heavier, bigger particle air pollution. And the cost of mortality, well, these are big issues, and the United States is right up there. Essentially, we're losing 4% of our GDP due to this outdoor air. Diabetes, it's so much greater than it used to be 50 years ago. Pregnancy and blood pressure, all sorts of issues related to pregnancy. Well, this is an older slide, but I left it in here. 2015, 16, and 17 bleaching events on the Great Barrier Reef. That was frightening. But in the last 2 years, it's happening again. So actually 2019 through 20 has been a third one. So that's 3 and 5 years. And they say that if there's a bad coral bleaching event, it can recover. But when you get these multiple years, it's sustained bleaching and they will not be recovering. And this is a primary source of the nutrition in the ocean for the bigger fish. Not to mention the beauty. Now, marine vertebrates have declined by almost half. And actually now it is more than half because this is an older slide. And they say the weight of the plastic in the ocean will be larger than the marine vertebrates in just the next decade. And there's been certain fish species that have too much mercury contamination, and we've been told not to eat them, especially when childbearing years. And coal burning plants are doing that right here, right on our, inside of our shores. And we've got 42% is by these mercury emissions from coal. There is a little from other sources, but coal is the biggie. Told you I was going to pick on coal. Hey, we're going to get to solutions real soon, so I'm going to go a little faster here. Fracking, now it's not economical because prices for oil are in the tank, but these pollution issues, and this is where they've really, the administration has loosened some of the requirements for cleaning up these areas. 50% of land-based species. Just today, I read something that says we're approaching 70% if we don't take action, and that's just in the next 10 years. Now, COVID. These infectious diseases, including some of the previous one, SARS, and can't think of the other one. SARS and others have come, Zika, have come from animals. So this zoonotic meaning they're transmitted from animals to humans, and COVID is included in this group. They say 2 billion animals died in Australia alone in the forest fires last year, but slowly we've been losing our bird population, which means an increase in the insect population. Now, tipping points. I assume you've heard that term. This is the best summary of it that I've seen, which is from February of this year. The word shutdown. This is sort of already happening. I just can only describe it as, if you could see me, I'd be able to talk you through it and show you. But there was, around the parallel between the United States and Canada, there was a constant band around the earth of circulation of air. And what's happened, and the reason the Arctic has had 50-degree temperatures in February 2 years in a row, is because there's now these big waves of dipping down of the Arctic air, and it's sucking up the warmer air from as far away as the equator. So a circulation pattern has changed in the air. It's also changed in the ocean, and it's part of why we have more heat in the oceans. By the way, that those waves that you've heard called the polar vortex, they are coming into New England more often, and it may be a regular situation where they're having more extreme winters. Number two there, West Antarctic ice sheet collapsing. Greenland's got the same risk. These are tipping points, and we're heading that direction if we don't go back to the Paris Accords. Amazon rainforest, the loss of trees, so loss of oxygen being back in the air and carbon dioxide being sequestered. The Western African shift, the rain patterns have changed. There are people, millions of people, who've had to leave their small farms and migrate to cities where it's intolerable situations in many cases. Permafrost melting, this one's scary because methane is under that ice and permafrost, and it's 80 times worse than carbon dioxide. Coral reefs we've looked at, the Indian monsoon, again, these big waves of atmospheric change instead of a more steady state that we've had for 5,000 years. Good agriculture in those 5,000 years. It's changing. And the boreal forest shift, that is moist forest no longer being as moist. And methane has really increased because it's what's being burned as a substitution for coal, which is good, but if we don't harvest it correctly and capture it at the top of the stack, we're adding to that methane in the atmosphere. Psychological effects, well, I know many of us have felt some depression over COVID. Well, those of us who are dealing with the climate issue take it seriously, and many of us have had those same feelings, like, how will we get out of this? But I'm optimistic. We covered all these things. I let the cash register ring there because a lot of these things are caused by the desire for money. And then it's more money, and it's still not enough. The money could be better spent. The money could be better spent and have a healthier global economy. So the solutions. I'm so glad to be able to present this. We need to transition as quickly as possible to clean, healthy forms of energy like wind and solar, period. Now this renewables percent of global power generation is a slide I just created today after some research. Work with the numbers at the top. 30% in 2020 is where we are with global power generation by renewables. In 2015, it was 10%. This is a huge, dramatic rise, and it's good news. And I can promise you, this is not some individual with their solar roof panels making such a big difference. This is the utility companies investing because it's cheaper than burning coal or nuclear power. Now that's where I think all coal should be, sitting on a sidewalk at a museum. Now, why would the Kentucky Coal Mining Museum do this next slide? To save money. That's why they did it. And Tesla has built this huge device, which paid for itself in the first year. Outside my window in Mexico City, there were taxis getting charged. And good news, people are planting more trees. This seemed really impressive when 44,000 people in Ecuador planted 650,000 trees. But look what happened soon after that. It became competition. Ethiopians planted 350 million trees on one day last year. Now this is important. China is doing the same thing. You can take desert land and revive it by planting trees. And a lot of them need water the first year, but after that, they have a good chance of survival. China and India have these huge programs of planting trees. You'll notice the United States isn't on that, but after these forest fires, we certainly will need to be. Oh, we are, I apologize. We are in there in the middle. Hydrogen-powered train. It's out there 2 years already, going every day, working the rails. Now, electric bikes have really taken off in the European Union. Electric cars are just starting to. And other countries are skipping the whole wires to your home thing and putting up solar panels. Now that panel probably runs a light bulb or two, and possibly an electric stove, and possibly a computer. These computers are charging with solar energy, and this is a school in action. Look at the size of that solar array on a desert. This is the largest one in the world in China. And enough solar energy reaches the Earth every hour to fill all the world's energy needs for a full year. All we have to do is be devoted to making this happen. And it takes governments, and it takes smart scientists and engineers. Because right now we're only getting about 25% of the energy available when the sun hits a solar panel. Imagine what happens when we get that up to 50 or 60 or 100%. Solar energy jobs, they're out there and they're growing fast and employs 10 times more people than the fossil fuel industry. Let me repeat that. The green economy generates 9.5 million full-time jobs. That's 10 times more than the fossil fuel industry. So don't let anybody say, well, what are we going to do with all those people who won't have those jobs? There's opportunity for them too in green jobs. Fastest growing job in America, solar and wind. Now the US has done quite a job, starting to get up to speed. In wind, think about it, the equivalent of 32 million homes powered by wind. So these are big numbers, but I promise you, China is way, way ahead of us. Onshore wind capacity, we've gotten up to this 100 gigawatts. I just want you to see how in just 14, 15 years, how the growth is in wind capacity. And there's more planned, lots more planned. And I love things like this when there's an X Prize to award $20 million to the people who figure out how to convert CO2 emissions to something else. And there are things happening. And Bill Gates is behind one of them. So hopefully his genius will continue to help the planet. So this is true. The Paris Accord, it really, we're not out, but we will be, could be. I won't say any more. Sorry. So this increase in global temperature by 2100, 7.6 degrees Fahrenheit, that would be disastrous. And that's what happens if we do like we've done for too long, the same thing we've always done. The change is now, it has to be now. And we have to get down to that green line, the goals of only being increased by 2.8%, 2.8 Fahrenheit degrees, which is still 2.8 higher than before 1850 when we started burning coal. We've already done 1 degree of those 2.8 Fahrenheit. So we need to get this under control. And I hope that you're with me on this because it's happening in some places. Costa Rica, 300 days of all renewable electricity. Now I will admit they used hydropower. Hydropower is 60% of that total number of renewables, which are up to 30% for powering electric plants. So as much as I'd hate to see any ecosystems destroyed, this is one thing that could be done. So bad for our health to burn fossil fuels. The transition to clean forms of energy minimize terrible effects of climate change, but there's health benefits from cleaner air, and there are jobs, jobs, jobs. And I think about my own grandchild because this is so important. And everybody should be thinking about the future generations. I hope everyone listening, watching, is doing recycling because it's a thing that you can do that keeps your mindset every day on the importance of what each individual can do. And we put out a lot of tons of CO2 every year per person in a very rich country. So we all need to reduce, reuse, recycle, and refuse that straw with your water or soda. And you can lower your carbon footprint. And people like Greta Thunberg are doing a remarkable job, and it's going to take the young people to wake us all up as soon as possible. And it's going to take those of us who vote to make a difference. And we're doing it for the future of the earth and our children. Thank you.